couple of weeks ago about how we want to start this, and he says that he has a great introduction, a way he likes to start his talk, so I'm going to hand it over to Eric and let him have at it.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a great introduction. I have, as Ron has said, I've done this a few times before, and just really glad to be here. I'm a Colorado resident. I spend most of my time up in the Edwards area, just up the road. And winter times in La Quinta, California, because I don't do snow anymore unless the grandkids want me to come up and fall down in front of them. So thank you all for allowing me to visit with you. And I'm a visitor, I'm not a lecturer. I'm a huge believer in the Socratic method of education. I've been informed that, first of all, I'm going to get into the questions already. How many students do we have in the room? Okay, make sure you sign some paperwork, I understand, in the back, because there is going to be a quiz coming up in the next week or two. I don't know when it's going to come up, but, and secondly, related to that, if you worked for me, you knew that I always carried around one of these things. And this is before they came out with PDAs. Is that what they call those things? Personal displays of affection? What are they? Personal digital assistants, your phone, etc. So please, students, and non-students, you don't have to abide by this, but students, you will be quizzed. I've already told you that. I'm going to encourage you to write down a few things. And if you don't have pens or papers or PDAs, figure out how to do it, because my employees used to know if they came to a meeting and they were not carrying a notebook or some form of something to write on, they were in big trouble, because I'm not smart enough to remember everything I see and hear. I haven't run across anyone yet in a lot of travels that is. And I'm only going to throw out a few things that I think are worth writing down, but the things I do throw out that are worth writing down are worth writing down. So with that said, the fun introduction I have is, do you know how terrifying this is? Psychologists have done many, many tests on many, many people to determine what are the scariest things in life. And you may guess a few. Death, birth of a child or birth of anything, marriage, trust me, that's scary. There are all kinds of things that are frightening to people. The number one thing that psychologists have said is the most scary thing for anybody is public speaking. It's fascinating. And I have the privilege, and Ron does as well, to know a guy by the name of Ken Blanchard, who wrote a little book called The 1 Minute Manager, and it'll take you about 5 minutes to read it. It is literally a little book, but it's sold over 29 million copies. Ken has since written or co-written probably 40 books and is a terrific speaker. And I asked him one time, I said, Ken, how do you do this? You give speeches to thousands of people, and you always seem so comfortable. And he said, Eric, a long time ago, and I can't remember who he learned it from, but he said, there are three things, if you are going to give talks to groups of people like this, some of you have to do it, some of you will have to do it at some point in your career. Number one, I like you. That's what he tells himself. Number two, I like me. And number three, I know what I know. I don't know what you all know, but I'm very comfortable telling you some things that I know. And he says, every time I give a speech, I remind myself of those things, because otherwise I'd be petrified. Who are all these strangers, and what are they doing here? What do they expect from me? So, interesting way to think about public speaking. Okay, here's the one first thing I want the students to think about. If you read the bio that was put together, and I don't know who wrote it because half of the stuff isn't true, but I ran an organization called Club Corp, which is the world's largest owner of golf and dining clubs. We sold it in 2017. We had 20,000 employees, revenues of about $1.2 billion. Of those revenues, about $350 million were food and beverage, so it wasn't just a golf company. And anybody who knows the golf industry knows that it's multifaceted, to say the least. And I was asked repeatedly when I would go around the country and give talks, and it had nothing to do with me, had everything to do with the position, and people thought it was really cool. Here's this guy who's in the golf industry. He's got the greatest job in the world. He probably plays golf every day, which is not true, as Ron knows well. But the thing that I would tell applicants, and this is particularly true for those of you students, maybe still trying to figure out what you're going to do for a career. You know, the question was, what's your criticism of the people who you talk to applying for jobs? And this could be graduate school students, it could be undergraduate school students, it could be people who've been out of school for many, many years. And as Ron said, I won't use that word, but I can be hard-ass sometimes. And I said, look, I don't mean to be critical, but the majority of people that I interview can't read, can't write, and don't know how to think critically. And that's tough if you can't do those things. And I'm going to give you some examples of critical thinking here as we go along. But two questions I want to ask you right now, and again for the students, please write it down. Why are you here? Second question, and I'll have to look at my notes because I can't remember stuff. What do you see? Why are you here and what do you see? For some of you, the answer to the first question is, my professor told me I had to come to this darn class or I was going to not get a good grade. For some of you, you saw, well, this guy had something to do with golf. I think golf's really cool. He was the most powerful person in golf 3 times. And oh, by the way, the first time was the year Tiger had his little problem, so that kind of helped with my ascension up the leaderboard. But people should be asking themselves that question every day. Why are you here? Why are you in the gym? Why are you reading the Wall Street Journal? Why are you not? Why are you watching whatever you're watching on television? Hopefully the answer is to learn something that you didn't know before, that you can apply. Hopefully that's the answer to question number 1. Not because you've been coerced or forced to be here, or they had free booze. That's always the thing that usually draws the largest crowds. The second question of what do you see is a little more, is frankly even more interesting, because I used to tell people, still tell people, and I think Ron operates in the same way, I'm not smarter than anybody in this room, not close. But I guarantee you, I will probably ask more questions than anybody in this room. I used to drive people nuts, professors nuts in particular, asking questions. And I'll also see the cobweb in the corner over there on the far right that housekeeping missed. And I'll ask myself, why is that there? Is it deliberate? I used to go in, and some of you may appreciate this if you have your own businesses, and I know many of you do. I used to go to some of our clubs. I would travel around. The first year, our company owned over 250 locations, and the first year we bought the company, the longest stretch I spent sleeping in my own bed was 6 nights. I traveled to over 150 locations in that first year. And I did it because I needed to get to understand who I was working with, and also to reassure our members that I wasn't this boogeyman from some private equity shop that was going to come and do terrible things. But one of the things I noticed, and I always thought this was quasi-comical, I'd go into clubhouses, and you guys will laugh at this, and open a door, and it would go, and I would say, wow, these guys are really into Halloween. But the reality was, they didn't notice. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you experience? WD-40 is a remarkable product. If you've never run across it, this is going to be big someday. And it eliminates the Halloween effect on doors. That's just a little example, but my challenge to everybody who ever worked with me was, open your eyes. What do you see? What can we do to improve? Because again, I don't know the answers. I'm just one person in a 20,000 person organization who's asking a lot of questions. So, two things to think about. The next thing that I'd like everybody to do, not only the students, you don't have to write this one down. This one takes about a nanosecond. And if it takes longer, we're in trouble. Give me the one word adjective that best describes you. And I literally will give you 60 seconds to think about it. One word only that best describes you. And when somebody has one, raise your hand. You've done this before. You're disqualified. You've done this before too. Susie, go ahead. No, you can't use mine. Susie, go ahead. Energy, okay. One word adjective. Yes, sir. Flexible. That's great. Yes, sir. Adventurous. Yes, sir. Optimistic. Caring. Creative. Helpful. Enthusiastic. Loyal. Determined. Yes, sir. Inquisitive. What do all of those adjectives have in common?
Entrepreneurial mindset.
Nope. They're all positive. I've never, and I've done this in a room with 1,000 people, I've never had someone say slothful, lazy, stupid. Never. And why is that important? Because in life, and again, we all learn this over time. People generally have a positive self-impression, and it's our job as leaders and communicators and people who work with other people. We all work with other people to bring out the positive in people. The worst leaders are those who focus on negatives. You're really dumb. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Where'd you come up with that? I had another fun drill as you go through life. Write down the characteristics of the best leaders you've ever had and emulate them. Write down the characteristics of the worst you've ever had and try never to do that. And one of the people I worked with who was one of the worst, very successful financially, but literally in a meeting with the general manager of one of our clubs, and I'm sitting right there. I'm not going to use the F-bomb, but he did, and he said, "Ken, you're an effing idiot." And I'm sure Ken was going, "God, I feel great. The CEO of the company just told me that. That's so cool." Nobody liked working for the guy. So everybody has positive things to think about themselves. Mine happens to be, and Ron called it out, curious. And if I had two words, it would be habitually curious. I can't stop thinking about, why does Taco Bell have this stuff on the menu? I know at this point you're thinking, this guy's twisted. But it's true. But it is a great attribute to have when you're constantly thinking about, and again, this comes back to why are you here and what do you see? So, fun stuff, and I'm going to come back to another exercise here in just a minute, but the last reason I ask that question is that I want to know how people view themselves. This is in an interviewing phase, if someone's potentially going to come to work with me. And it is shocking to me the number of people who are stumped by that question. literally say, I don't know. If you don't know yourself, you're in trouble. Because it's going to be very hard to translate the positive things that you think about yourself and the positive things about you into a job, into a relationship, into anything. If someone's stumped by that question, I'm probably not going to hire them. And in another context, many years ago, there was this guy in China whose name was Sun Tzu. He wrote a book. I'm going to throw out a lot of books. I encourage you to read this one if you haven't read it. It's called The Art of War. Very famous. It has direct application. Many business schools require it for their students. The Art of War. It does sound like a very fun book to read. But one of the things that Sun Tzu said, and by the way, does any of the students know who the guy was? When did he live? What did he do? Better work on that in the history class. He was an advisor to Chinese warlords in about the 6th century, and one of his maxims, which relates to what we're talking about, and throughout this little chat you're going to say, this guy's weaving all over the board, but I'm pretty linear. I'm just going to take you there in a weaving sort of way. One of his maxims was, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, in 100 battles you'll never lose. The other part of that coin is, if you know the enemy and not yourself, how many battles do you think you'll lose? 50% at least, right? If you know yourself and not the enemy, what do you think? 50%. We're talking about life and death. So knowing yourself and understanding what you're good at, what you're passionate about, because I'm going to talk a little bit here momentarily about purpose, because everybody works better with a purpose. Not just waking up every day and saying, I just do it because I do it, because I have to do it, because my mom and dad told me to do it, my boss told me to do it. That sucks. Pardon me. But those of you who are still in school, you're probably, again, coming back to studies that have been done, you're going to change jobs 5, 6, 7, 8 times before you find the thing that you really are fired up about. And the sooner you can figure out what you're passionate about, the more successful you're going to be. So with that, we'll go back to some of the Q&A. I've actually, if you want to ask the questions, or do you want me to just run through them?
I'd like people to hear my voice, if that's okay. I would have answered good looking on your question, but it's 2 words. So, now, Eric, however you want to do it is fine with me. I can lead, and you can just answer as many of these as you want. But I'd love to hear about the history of your career, because you have this bachelor's degree. So we have students in here. You're wondering, what should I study? What should I do at school? And you have a political science and religion degree, and then you go off and have this incredible career. Can you connect the two for me, and also tell us about how you ended up with Club Corps?
They're entirely unrelated. No. It's a fun question for me, because I don't know how many of you in the room were weird like this. In high school, I had this literally like a revelation, and I'll digress for a minute. I have a dear friend who is extremely philanthropic, and he swears in junior high, some voice said to him, Afghanistan, in junior high. And if it were me, I'd go, where the hell's Afghanistan? What's in Afghanistan? He winds up now, 40 years later, building a business and employing, I don't know, a couple hundred people in Afghanistan with all the nasty stuff that went on. And he swears it was because he says God told him Afghanistan in 7th grade. I had a somewhat similar experience, thank goodness it wasn't Afghanistan. But in high school, I decided that I was going to do one of 3 things in my life. I was either going to play professional baseball, or I was going to become a U.S. Senator, or I was going to become a pastor. none of them happened, obviously. I stunk in baseball. And the religion thing didn't work out. I was told by a pastor, actually, when I was graduating, don't go into the full-time ministry. You'll have far greater effect being in the business world. You'll be able to touch a lot more people. And the political science deal just didn't work out either, although I was a town council member up in Vail, and after one term of working with 6 other people who were total idiots, I said, politics is not for me. And I feel badly for people who do serve, and I know you do, and my compliments to you, but it's horribly frustrating, and we can't get anything done in this country, and it's quite sad. So that led me to the school I went to, Claremont McKenna, which specializes in political science, not in theology. As an example, one of my religion profs at Scripps, the women's college next door, the school was, or the class was called The Bible is Literature, and literally the first day of class, and this Ron will chuckle over this, literally the first day of class, the professor stands up and says, now we all know nothing in the Bible is real. This is all just fiction, right? And I immediately raised my hand, and which is a bad habit of mine. And she says, yes, young man. I said, I disagree with that. And all kids in the class turn around and go, you're cooked. So, but we had a good conversation as the semester went on, and fortunately I got an A in the class, and we agreed to disagree. But the track from poli-sci to theology, and again, this is where there's a book, it's a fun book, it's called God Winks, and if you think about it, you'll really enjoy it. A lot of times things happen in life and you go, that is so random. I mean, I just bumped into this person who, they own this amazing golf course here in Colorado. That is so random. Why would that happen? And of course the thesis is, God's up there going, hello? Anybody remember I kind of have something to do with what's going on down there? So it's called God Winks, but there's so many things that are serendipitous in our life. And due to my baseball, I'm really dating myself now, because you guys think I'm probably in my mid-30s. I only look like it. I only cut my hair short just so I can look like Robert Downey Jr. In 1977, I was asked to join a college all-star baseball team to go play exhibition games in Holland. And went over with the team. The Belgian national baseball program, and Belgium's a little dinky company right below Holland if you know your European geography. The Belgian national baseball program said, could we have one player come down here and work with our people? And it was everything from Bobby Sox to Little League to their national team. And guess what I did? I said, I'll do it. Most of the guys on the team, frankly, were more interested in hanging out at the Heineken Brewery than they were actually coaching baseball. So I went down to Antwerp and coached that summer. And 2 weeks before about the time I was going to head home from spending the summer in Belgium, living with family, the manager of the Belgian national team quit right before the European Championships. And some of you who follow, if any of you follow baseball, you know right now the World Baseball Championships is about to start. And baseball's gone back and forth between being an Olympic sport and a non-Olympic sport. In any event, the Belgian Federation came to me and said, would you take the team to the European Championships? And I said again, what are you, nuts? There's only one player on the team who's younger than me. Everybody else is older than me. These are true amateurs. And they said, no, we talked to the team, they realize that you know more about baseball than they do, and they want you to do it. Okay, sure, what the heck? So we finished third in the European Championships in 1977. Belgium had never finished that high. And because the next year, the World Championships, which they're now playing in Miami this week, the World Championships are going to be held in Italy. And the rules of the game are the host country gets an automatic bye. Well, Europe then had 2 spots to fill. So for the first time in history, Belgium goes to the World Championships. And they said, would you please come back next summer and take the team to the World Championships in Italy? And we wound up losing all 12 games, playing Cuba, the United States, Nicaragua, Mexico, Japan, the true baseball powerhouses in the world. And I'm 20 years old. And another funny sidebar story. You guys have seen the soccer things where they've got those big horns, when they're making all the noise and stuff. So I'm interviewed in a paper in Italy, and they said, you're the youngest manager ever in the history of the World Baseball Championships. What are your observations? I said, well, I'm having a blast. I love it. I love Italy. People are very nice. But I don't understand why Italy's playing with professional players, and Cuba is clearly playing with professional players. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I know about 5 guys on the Italian team, and they're playing in America. And they've all told me they've given cars, and they're given apartments, and they're paid to come over here and play. And Cuba, make no bones about it, these people are paid to play baseball for Cuba. So the next morning, the newspaper in Rimini or Parma or Bologna has headquarters in this sports section. Belgian manager rips Italian baseball. And of course, when I came out that day for the game, so note to self, be careful what you say to the press. But any event, all this leads to, and it's again, long answer to your question. When I flew over the second time, I sat next to a gentleman who worked for a company called Kidder Peabody, which is now no longer exists. It became Payne Weber, which became UBS. And I'm chatting with this guy on the flight from Los Angeles to Brussels, and we land, and he says, don't go to law school, don't go to seminary, come work for us. And this is a finance company, and I'm not a finance major. So he says, go back, take your senior year, take all the finance classes you possibly can, and come work with us. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. So I went back and took a bunch of finance classes, graduated, had my own financial advisory business, and in 1992, living in Vail, on the town council, on the hospital board, all the things you do when you're in your 20s in Vail and you're not there to ski or party. And a friend of mine who co-founded a private equity firm with KKR, largest private equity shop in the world at the time, said, hey, I'm going to start this new company. It's going to be called KSL. We're going to go out and try to buy things in the travel, tourism, and recreation sectors. Do you want to take a flyer? And I said, okay. So we formed this private equity firm that became quite successful, returning to KKR about $2+ billion on an investment of $300 or $400 million. We then formed a second fund, cleverly called KSL Capital Partners instead of KSL, whatever we were the first time, and set out to raise $200 million. We raised $1 billion. We then bought Club Corp as one of our first investments because I had been an operating partner more than a deal person. I raised my hand and said, I'll move to Dallas and run the largest golf and dining company in the world. And it worked out relatively well. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. But again, it's the kind of strange twists and turns in life that sometimes you never really understand why you're there. But if you ask yourself why I'm here and what do I see, eventually you're going to go someplace. So that's how I got to Club Corp.
That's great. One of my favorite questions to ask is about the randomness of life. The older I get, the more I see the way people's careers and lives go. It's like that Price is Right game, Plinko. Does anybody know the Price is Right? You put the thing at the top and it bounces around and you don't know where it's going to end up at the bottom. And I have students who are planners. I mean, they think they've got their life plan from 20 to 70. And I've got students who have no idea what they're going to do, and I always try to emphasize to the planners, listen, I'm glad you have a plan, but you've got to stay nimble. And so I wanted to ask you, in your experience, in your career, and in your life, what do you see about planning versus random opportunities? It sounds like you ran into a lot of random opportunities.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time, frankly. I had no idea how the whole Belgian thing was going to work out. I was not afraid to go off and try something on my own. To your point, there's a great Mike Tyson quote, which some of you may know, that talking about boxing, and he says everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. And General Patton had another quote in World War II that a good plan executed violently now, his words, not mine, is better than a great plan executed a month from now. So oftentimes you just have to take a leap of faith. And this is your next exercise for you students. And this gets back to kind of how do you wind up wherever you wind up. I had a recruiter one time who was contacting me about a different position, and he said, I asked all the people I interviewed to take this exercise, to do this exercise. So here's the exercise. Write down 5 things in your life. You can go back as far as you want. You can go back to kindergarten, you can go back to the day you were born. Write down 5 things in your life that you've both done well and enjoyed doing. This kind of gets back to the passion and the purpose. 5 things. There's no right or wrong answer. 5 things in your life. If you were really, really good at track, but you hated it, can't do it. If you really, really enjoyed math, but you were crummy at it, can't do it. Has to be 5 things that you both did well and enjoyed doing. So I did that exercise. And my first one, I won't tell you them all, my first one was when I first started playing organized baseball at the age of 10. Anybody play baseball in the room ever in your life? You know what a catcher is? You know what they call the stuff they put on, the chest guard and the knee protectors? The tools of ignorance. That's what they call them. I'm lucky that I only have 1 broken finger from those years of being a catcher. But first day out, the coach says, okay, I need a catcher. We're going to start batting practice. Guess what did I do? I'll try it. Never done it before. I wound up being pretty good. I was the first all-star at 11 years old in the history of our little league. And one of the things that came of that, because remember, you got to be good at it, and it's got to be something you enjoy. I enjoyed calling pitches. I enjoyed telling infielders where to move around. I enjoyed, at its primitive form, leadership. I like to be involved in every pitch. Now later when I got to college, and of course they saw my skill set, they put me in right field, which was far safer for the team. But I loved that, and it's one of the things that's the first thing that came to my mind. And so, to the question of randomness, it's not really all random. If you can truly identify those things that you are passionate about, that you do well, and you really enjoy doing.
So I want to get back to your degrees. I did economics and philosophy, and I always felt like it gave me some really good critical thinking skills, like you said, to apply. So what other skills do you see from your educational background that were applied that you didn't expect would be applied in your career?
I've never been asked that question. It's fascinating, but I've thought about it. I think the concept, obviously, of an attorney, of a lawyer, and ultimately what happens because the majority of people in Congress are lawyers by background, which is a big problem. But what they have to do is kind of look at problems differently and figure out, is there an angle that I can use to win a case? So that is truly critical thinking. And the other thing that's fascinating when you look at, because a lot of people said political science and religion, those two things are like totally opposite. They don't have anything to do with one another. Not true. When the politician is trying to convince you about their point of view or their bill or whatever the case may be, what's the pastor doing on Sunday morning? It's all about communication. And both of those things are critical in leadership. You've got to be able to communicate. In fact, if you want to write this one down, this is really more toward business people. I believe successful leaders do three things. They do more than three things, but they must do three things. They must establish a vision, a dream, a purpose. Martin Luther King didn't say, I have a strategic plan, did he? He said, I have a dream. They must allocate resources. So now you have a dream, that's nice. You have a plan, that's nice. Where are you going to get the money to do this? Who's going to work with you to do this? How do you hire the right people to do this? So have a dream, have a vision, allocate your resources, human and financial. And the last one, where a lot of people fall down, is you have to ensure execution. It does no good to say, I've got this great idea, and I've got some really cool people to work with. Now I'm just going to sit back and hope it happens. Doesn't happen.
So you've kind of touched on this, but I want to know how you would describe your leadership style. You've been in so many positions of high-end leadership. How would you describe it?
I am a collaborator, as I heard Ron say a little earlier. I'd like to think I'm pretty collegial. I know, and you guys have probably picked up on this, that I challenge people, and I like to be challenged. When I took over at Club Corp, I told people there, you can call me anything you want to call me. Just don't insult my faith or my family, and we'll get along fine. You can tell me you think my ideas are totally stupid. I don't care. And I also told people, I'd like to be liked, but I really want you to respect me. At the end of the day, the decisions that I'm helping us make, you may not like me personally, but I want you to step back and go, wasn't a bad decision. So, I think the ability to communicate is clearly required in both of those fields of study.
Okay, what was your most interesting career challenge, and what was the most rewarding part of your career and difficult part of your career?
Interesting career challenge. Probably dates back, and it wasn't part of my career, but it was the whole baseball example, to have any kind of credibility at the age of 20 to take a team to effectively an Olympic sport. To take over a 50-year-old company that had been owned by one family was a very difficult challenge. I told you earlier, or maybe I didn't in this setting, but I had people tell me literally, the company was founded by a Dedman family in Dallas, and Robert Dedman in particular, and he's considered to be the godfather of modern golf management, golf ownership. And I literally had people get in my face and say, "You're not Robert Dedman." And I looked at him and said, "No, he's dead, get over it. We're gonna do some fun things, and it's okay." But that took a lot for people to ultimately say, the guy's not stupid. He actually has some interesting ideas. So I think that's the greatest challenge. Rewarding part of career is really easy, and Ron gets, touched on this earlier. But when we bought our company, when we bought Club Corp in 2006, it was about to celebrate its 50th anniversary. And I said, there's got to be something we can do to celebrate 50 years in this industry. It is the first of its kind in the industry. So what can we do? And with another mutual friend of ours, who sadly passed away about 2 weeks ago after 18 years of ALS, I said, here's my idea. I want to have a national day of charity for all of our clubs, where we close the clubs to the public, so to speak, or our members, and we raise money and we give those to charities. We're going to celebrate our birthday by giving back to the community. And of course, that sounds kind of like a noble thing to do, right? And I sat in our boardroom in Dallas, which was actually a pretty impressive boardroom, frankly, and looked around at the executives and said, here's my idea. We're going to have this national charity day. We're going to close down all the clubs. The members Nobody's gonna be there except people who pay to come out, and all those funds, it's gonna be net, or excuse me, gross. Every single penny that comes in is going to charities. And you'd have thought I had two heads. And hands went up around the room. Eric, we can't do that. I said, okay, explain. We've never done it before. Good, that's a real good answer. What if the members don't like it? Well, let's see, it's for charity, and ultimately we will end up having each club pick a charity of choice, so they get to participate in the whole thing. Only the Scrooges of the world are gonna say that this is a stupid thing. It's one day. You can pick your one day. It's gonna be really hard. Oh, okay, that's a good reason not to do it. So finally had to just say, we're doing it. And it wound up being certainly one of the most rewarding things I've ever done from a financial standpoint, which is important because you do have to make a profit in order to keep any company going. We bought the company in 2006 in a private transaction. We paid back all of our debt, which was $1.2 billion. We bought the company for $1.5 billion, borrowed $1.2 billion, paid back $1.2 billion in 6 months because our growth was so fast. And it wound up being just the largest successful investment for our private equity firm, which has allowed them to go on and raise another $15 billion over time. So financially, it turned out to be pretty good.
Don't know me, my name is Carlos Baldo. I'm the academic head of the School of Business. And this is the second time that we're doing this event. And as I understand, we're already working on the third one. So we have somebody already in line. Thanks for our friends at Bactra to support this series of events, and we hope to keep having your support for the future. Thank you again, and keep helping our School of Business to grow up.